Good afternoon and welcome to your Friday Network Fest webinar, the fifth in our series of 5. And you might think that this is just how we dress normally in Kaleidoscope. It's not always, but we normally dress up especially for the occasion of the end of Network Fest. We said yesterday, if you joined the 4 previous webinars, you get a gold star. If this is now your fifth of 5, you get yourself 2 gold stars and a pat on the back. And anything else which you might have to hand, which signifies well done. Thanks so much for joining us. I think we've had a great week. What have we been talking about so far this week, Danny?
So on Monday we tackled management, on Tuesday we tackled disengagement, Wednesday was communication, and yesterday we talked about how to measure success of your network.
And today we're going to get on to exactly what we're talking about today. A fantastic special guest with us. What we're trying to do with Network Fest is actually spark debate and discussion all about great network things going on all across the country and beyond. So it's very much for you to get involved with. I should have said I'm Rich, by the way. Anna, how can people get involved?
Yeah, there's 2 ways to get involved. Either via Twitter, you can #NetworkFest at Kscope Health, or via the chat facility that should be on your screens.
Excellent. Great. Good. But we are also going to be trying something a bit different today, where we're going to have some options for voting. So look in the chat box for how you get on with that. Danny, what are we talking about today?
Today, Rich, we're talking about, do networks have a natural life? We anthropomorphise networks. We talk about evolution and life and death. Okay, so when you've measured success for your network, how do you know when it's come to success? We've got the brilliant Becky with us today, Professor of Health Systems Innovation at London South Bank University, but more importantly, Chair of the Kaleidoscope Network Faculty, who's going to be answering your questions.
The pinnacle of your career, Becky. That's the important bit here. So great topic and a really nice way to end the week. So Becky, I think you're going to kick us off, and then we're going to go into discussion. So Becky, let's pop the slides up, and there's just the details. Over to you, Becky. Thanks so much for joining.
Great. Thanks so much. It's good to meet you all. Thanks for joining too. So I'm just doing a bit about what makes networks work, and then how do you know when they've sort of done their job, really. So if you go on to a little bit about me, for those of you that don't know me. I've got a clinical history. I've done most management jobs in the NHS. I love networks. I do think some people really do, a bit like Richard, really do tend to prefer working in a peer-based, energetic, collaborative, creative form than a bureaucracy and hierarchy. I'm sort of trying to both be in a bureaucracy, because at one level they're fabulous for making sure that we still have a public sector, so I'm at a university. But also to generate a network, and I love working in networks, because I think you not only do you get challenged, you just get loads more done, actually. So that's my natural inclination to networks. It's part of my personal life as well as my work life. But let's get on to the business of the session, which is about what makes networks work. So if networks are collaborative, cooperative means that are creative ways of solving problems that really are not amenable to command and control. So if you think of the very first organising of man, it was in tribals, and in those days, our very first organising form was actually networked. We got into, as we started getting into organisations that got bigger and bigger and felt more and more difficult to manage, people didn't naturally know how to organise as networks, and Taylorism came in and hierarchies came in. And they were really about managing scale and making sure that the people that owned the business as it generated it were convinced and sure that the business was delivering what they had set it up for. So hierarchies are really great where you've got very clear objectives, where if you do X, Y always happens. They're predictable, they're deterministic. In the health sector, the social care sector, there's very, very little that is best managed through a hierarchy. Getting people's legs chopped off for the right one is really important. So if you're having major surgery, that absolutely has to be in a very strong hierarchy. Everyone knows their roles and it's deterministic. We know what's going to happen. Payroll, get everyone paid on time, that's pretty important. So there are some functions, but on the whole, most of the work that happens health systems is either something that's about an adaptive system, place-based collaboration of people where the solution is emergent, or a network where people have a shared purpose and a real clear identity and a mission and ambition together, may not need to belong to the same organization, but are looking for innovation. So you don't get innovation through hierarchies, you get emergent phenomena through adaptive systems, you get innovation through networks, and that's that's a fundamental difference. So once you know that, obviously innovation is about a specific purpose or a specific object. You've got something you want to sort, and so when you think about networks, they are there to do some work. And they're there because they've got a very strong purpose. Now, purpose tends to be in networks, sort of three types of purpose. Either you're trying to deliver something differently together. So you might think cancer networks might be doing that. They're trying to shape the stroke networks in London. You're trying to change the way stroke care is delivered together. That includes changing policies and practices. Sometimes they're learning networks. Some of the clinical networks are really about learning. A lot of Richard's network is about learning. So how do we ensure that we know more about something? And the third type of network is a sort of a lobbying network. So a network that's there to amplify voices, which is so when people, you might think you're in Diabetes UK, you might be learning through Diabetes UK, but you're also trying to ensure that there are resources and funding for people with diabetes. You're trying to get policy change in relation to people with diabetes. You're trying to get employment law changed in relation to people with diabetes. So you're lobbying. So the point of the network is that if you try and do it on your own, you don't get much done. If you do it with a whole gang of other people, you've got a bigger voice. So those are the types of networks very, very quickly. And you can see that, but they have got clear purpose and a very strong identity. So if a network is absolutely clear about its purpose and is achieving its purpose, and all the members have their needs met, i.e. they're getting something out of it and they're contributing. So if all of that is happening, there is this what we call reciprocity, some level of exchange, where people feel in a relational capacity to each other. They don't feel done to, they don't feel managed, they feel they have an equal voice, and where the network as a whole is generating what we call helpful outputs, and that might be policy, it might be fantastic learning tools. Networks are also really good at filtering stuff. A lot of the people I work with in clinical settings say, I don't know how on earth how do I track down the right information for this thing I'm doing. Networks are really, really great at that. So thinking a bit about stroke networks again, usually you've got a knowledge management function where somebody is trying to find out the best intelligence on strokes and get it out to everybody. So that's when networks work. So let's just go on, Danny and Richard, on to the next one. So this is how you know when networks work is done. So they are absolutely time limited, and they're time limited around securing purpose and generating those helpful outputs. Now I see, I was rung up by a region that said, we've got networks proliferated, they keep meeting, we don't know what they're doing. I said, well, if they're not doing anything, you're basically propping them up when they should have stopped. So the NHS is really bad at stopping stuff. It just does more and more stuff. So it doesn't stop doing ineffective stuff, it just tries to do some effective stuff and puts it on top of the ineffective stuff. And actually, so this is a tendency of the NHS of a bureaucracy. Bureaucracies are designed to sort of keep going no matter what, which is amazing, which means we don't have a private health sector, thank God. But that is what they're there to do. And so you've got this bureaucratic creep that creeps into NHS networks, which means that you have to say, actually, do you know what, we've done the job, it was great, loved you all, moving on to the next thing. And that's, that's an absolutely natural order of network. They're definitely not forever. They definitely have to. If you're very clear about the purpose, you should know when you've achieved it. So when have we, let's say, with a lobbying network, when have we got, 10 million more donated to something? And when that's happened, network's life is over, unless you find that you've got a different purpose. So let's get on to the next one. Next slide. Okay. So this is why networks fail. So they fail because they've done it. And well, they stop because they've done it, but they also do actually fail. So often they fail because not everyone's clear about purpose. Again, it's a bit of an NHS-y thing. We assume we're all in it for a common good. We've forgotten what the common good is, but we're really nice people. So, so if you're not clear about purpose, then how do you know that what you're doing together is worth it? And so networks have to pay real attention to purpose, and they have to re-clarify it, and they have to revisit it. And they have to make sure that all their accountabilities, reports, and outputs are related to that purpose. So if you don't have a common understanding of purpose across the members get really hacked off and they get irritated, and that's one reason they fail. The second one they fail is really common in NHS. They get institutionalized. They appoint a network leader. The network leader thinks they're the boss. The boss starts project managing things. Then they start performance managing network members who are not doing the things they're supposed to be doing. And in networks, members step up to the mark when they're really interested in something. So I'm really interested in this part of Richard's work, so I've stepped up as a member to chair their faculty. But I'm not involved in all of them. I go along to some of those lunches, but I don't run them, and I turn up as a member, but I don't lead anything in them. So as you can see, you take different roles for different tasks in networks. What you don't want is Richard to be performance managing you about why haven't you turned up. You know, I'm sending you a note now because you didn't turn up to enough lunches and therefore you're not a very good member. No, not helpful, not helpful at all. So you need a network leader who's very facilitative. It's a bit like, it's more a parental role really. It's encouraging, it's nurturing. It recognises that people are busy, that some topics aren't at the top of everyone's agenda. And if networks members aren't really contributing, your job is to just check in. Why? Are you okay? Is everything like, yeah, I'm fine, I'm just really busy, I'm really looking forward to the next thing. But your job is not to manage people. So network leaders do not manage networks. Network members manage networks, and that's the complete antithesis of the way most NHS management takes place. So at any point where you are being invited to and told what the agenda is, and then being required to, and then project managed, you know you're not in a network. You're in something called a network, which the NHS does all the time, but actually it's a project. So there's a real difference in projects and networks. So those are two. The third one is mistakes in initial design, which is how it's set up. So if you a bit further down, I've got predicating some members over another. If you think some members are just much greater members than other members, I like them more, and they get more of a say in how the network's set up and how it's run, then you're stuffed. So you've got to remember equal and peer. That's another real key tenet of networks. So the initial design, either in where you get your funding from, about what you promise, about the process of getting to purpose, i.e. if it's not done collaboratively with members, it's something that's been locked on, it's no good, or that you've generated purpose and galvanized the membership around it. You know, these are really important. The starting point really matters. So cementing relationships and structures, which means that if I become Richard's faculty chair, I do it for a bit, and then it's time for somebody else. You don't become it for life. So you don't become cemented, that's the only thing you do. If I want to go and play another bit of the Kaleidoscope network, I should have the opportunity to do that. Even that really irritates the boss. So that's the issue about networks, is that they can be irritating, they're phenomenally collaborative, but they need to give people space to grow. So this is here I've got one about expectations about willingness. There's a sort of general undercurrent in networks, which is, oh, they're not a very good member because they're not really contributing, they're not making the most of it. You have to discuss that at network meetings, but that's another reason why they fail, because there's an in and out group. Anything that constrains any member's independence, so every member comes either with a particular issue or maybe as part of the organisation, and if the network gets in the way of that organisation's goals or that individual's autonomy, you know, and steps over that mark, then again networks fail, because they've become an organisational form again. And the other reason they fail is back to what I was saying about being the chair too long. If the network doesn't recognise that someone's just got a bit of an old lag at stuff, including Richard and Danny here, you know, if you've got folks that have just been too long in the job and they're just doing it the same way they've always done it and it's not being creative, then again you've got problems. So you always need rotation, churn, movement in networks. And the last one is making any impact that meets network's purpose. So I think is that my last slide, folks? Quick look. Yes, that was my book. Obviously a bit of self-promotion. Why not? It's quite expensive. Anyway, it's 20 quid. I don't know. It depends if you buy legal books, I guess you pay hundreds. So, but if you buy sort of, you know, novels, it's 7 quid, isn't it? So I'm somewhere between the really expensive and the dead cheap. Okay. Questions? What would you want to ask?
Becky, thank you so much. That's a masterclass in networks. Although I have to say that's the poorest plug for a fantastic book ever. It's quite expensive. It's worth every penny. Go out and buy it. Very happy with our bookshelf just next door. Becky, huge amount of ground there. Thank you very much indeed. So Anna, just remind people how they can get involved, interact.
Yep, sure. Either via Twitter using #NetworkFest or via the chat box facility that's in front of you.
Excellent, great. And I think whilst those questions are coming through, just one for me to start, Becky, if that's okay. And you're talking a lot about, you know, we're bad at stopping things in the NHS. And is there a particular example which springs to mind where you have seen a network sort of close down really successfully? So rather than fizzling out in a bit of a damp squib, but actually people have thought, no, our work here is done, and it ended well. Really, any particular examples spring to mind?
Yeah, I think actually some of the QI networks are getting the hang of this. So I think they are recognising that they've got, their job is to learn and to share work around particular quality improvement, and quality improvement is also time limited. So I think people who are used to doing more prototyping type work and become involved in network leadership. They do understand that things have come to an end. It's almost the stroke collaboration in London came to an end because it's done the work. So I think where you've got very clinically focused tasks, you tend to. I think learning networks are the ones that struggle the most. So a lot of what we call clinical networks or clinical leader networks, or that are about how do we become the best foundation trust in the country. Those sorts of networks. They tend to fizzle out in the end because people aren't really clear about what success looked like and have we achieved it. So I'm thinking about, I can't really name them because it's just a bit rude. But I have got one in mind, which was an FT network that was about quality, and and it was very managed, and it was really unclear whether success was that all of those members were scoring high on quality. And of course, some of them dipped off. Then a bit of a panic ensued, which is, well, actually, all our members aren't now top quality scorers. So should we? What are they? And it got very tortuous about, should we then performance management, should we just expel them from the network because they're not good enough, and that to me lost the plot about what the network was about.
Okay, Becky, lots of interesting points there. Anna, we've got questions coming through.
We do, and please do keep them coming. So our first question is, so what can we do to change the way the NHS does these ways of managing networks and make them more dynamic?
Yeah, okay. So I think it's helpful to know what makes a network work and what doesn't. Just having a sort of checklist of these core ingredients. I'm not a great menus person, but I think that really helps. We've got something called the Source for Networks website. It's got some diagnostics up there. It really helps network leaders temperature test and see. It's got on it a grid that helps you see how mature your network is. So is it just that we are struggling because we're at a level of immaturity, or are we struggling because our work's done? So I do think it's a discipline that very few people know about. So good on Richard and the team for taking this on, because it's when you ask people to go and search and lit search stuff on networks, there isn't an awful lot out there. Probably between us here in the room now, as most people have written about it. So it's absolutely on trend, as they say, in the rest of the world, particularly in corporates. It's not at all well known in the NHS. So I would assume the best thing to do, the first thing you've got to do, is just know a bit more about it. So what is it? I've just given you that quick slide deck, what makes networks work. Pay attention to those things. Do a bit of a temperature test on it. So and then you can feel yourself dipping into project mode. So, and you know what projects look like. Soon as you get into any of those key things of networks failing, and that's the best thing to do, is to talk to your members about it. Are we falling into any of these traps? That's the only way you'll know, is to have the network conversation about it. If you're not having a network conversation about it, you're not a network.
I think one idea, Becky, surely every network in the country should have a gong, and every time it starts to get into project mode, you bang the gong, and then people get I think you make a very good point there about language, Becky, and people sort of say, "Oh, this is a network," when actually they're not really meaning a network in the way you described.
I mean, I think the other thing, Richard, people don't like to offend the network leader. So the problem is someone gets involved in it when they're a really nice person, and they're really great, and they put a lot of energy into it, and the members don't quite know how to handle it if their network leader is getting a little bit institutional. So this is difficult. This isn't easy. Peer-based working isn't easy. So designing in very early on, not just virtuals, but some face-to-face scheduled sessions where you just have a good review, and it becomes the pattern of the way of talking. You've got to do that at the outset. If you build it in when things are going wrong, it's already too late. Which
actually really resonates with the webinar earlier this week, which was, I'm trying to remember which one it was, but exactly how do you force yourself to having that conversation about, are we continuing to meet the purpose?
Yeah. I've got a question for you, Becky. We talked about some of the dynamics between the leadership and the membership in a network. And really, the question is, who makes that decision about when to stop? Because the members are going to be forming these great trusting relationships with their peers, and they may still be getting things out of it, even though a leader might feel that the purpose has been reached. And I suppose that also then leads on to a second question of, do networks ever really end, or actually do they kind of undergo karmic reincarnations, you know, in other ways?
No, they didn't end. It doesn't mean to say you don't keep the relationships and that people don't. Sorry, I just turn my phone off. The network's so windy. Doesn't mean you don't keep the relationships. It doesn't mean that people don't carry on working in other modes, in other networks together. I mean, I don't know about you, but I work with people in all sorts of ways. Some of them in multiple networks. So you know, you've got to remember, people. It's good to have the relational form, but the only way of deciding whether, if the best thing to do is if the network leader thinks, you know, I think we're sort of there, is to get the members together and say, you know, this was the purpose, have we met it? And yeah, a bit of honesty, yeah, we have. Have we got a shift in purpose? Has the purpose now changed and we want to carry on together? Or does somebody else want to take something in a different direction? And usually what happens is that people have really enjoyed the ride, so they like the social, they like the get-together, and often if the purpose isn't really clear and it isn't very energetic, they don't really want to lead it. So if you've got a network leader that is usually very passionately connected to the purpose and they think the purpose is achieved, unless someone else really steps up into it, then it will, in a very pleasant way, fold.
Great. Thank you. Lovely. Thank you very much. Good, great question. Thank you much, Becky. Anna, more questions?
Yeah, we have another question. Thank you, John, for this one. So John says he likes the idea of rotation within the network, but how can we ensure that a good representation from within the group occurs as opposed to the usual suspects?
Well, the thing about networks is you don't really have usual suspects. You have people who've got the energy to do stuff. So it's not quite the same. You know, you shouldn't be the guilty party if you haven't done it. What people don't like is when there's lack of reciprocity. So some people really, really hate leading, but they're very, very good at filtering, for instance. So some people take up a really great role of intelligence gathering and sharing, and some people take a more organizing role, or some people take a role of sort of scrutiny, or some people take the role of listening. So as long as people are contributing in some form, you don't predicate the person who's doing the organizing over anybody else. But if somebody isn't contributing, basically they're coming along, they're making no contribution at all, they're walking off with all the materials, and no one knows what they're doing, then the members collectively need to hold that to account and say, actually, this isn't the way we do business around here. So, you know, why are you here? Yeah, sorry, you would really need to step up to the mark now and do something. I think it's about time, you know. And again, these are not easy conversations to have, but you can have them with a bit of, you know, you can be a bit jolly about it, you know, you do a bit of the Richard jolly stuff, and that helps, you know. So as a member, it should be fun. So if you've got a member, you can invite them in and say, into the conversation, look, we haven't heard much from you, you know, what have you been doing with all the stuff? How about you present it at the next network meet, because we haven't heard from you? And if they don't want to do that, they'll probably run a mile, and they'll probably leave. So you don't have to be, you don't performance manage it, you give them the space to make a contribution.
Right, well, as soon as I'm done here, I'm going to be going off to the deep hole office to change my name to Richard Jolly Stuff. Becky, I found something. Thank you very much. That's something. I'm just going to do a quick reminder that we are sort of we're playing with innovations. We are running a poll as we're doing this. So do get out your phone or go on your laptop, Menti lock 23 71 50, and there's a few questions. It would be great if you can answer. It'll only take 30 seconds, and you can still engage with the webinar as we go. One more for me, Becky. I've got about 5-6 minutes left. Is the role of celebration in networks? Yeah. Obviously, particularly linking to your point about fun. Again, where have you seen networks which do this particularly well in terms of celebrating what they've achieved, and how do they go about it?
Yeah, actually, have you seen the Yorkshire Co-Production Network? They're really good at it. I mean, they produce nice graphics, they tweet about it, and I think networks do have a really important, because they're about amplifying, and they're about celebrating success, and they're about making stuff happen. If you don't talk about what you've made happen as members, then, you know, what's the point of being in the network? So you do have to talk about what you made happen, and usually people do that in a reasonably creative way. So so I quite like some of their stuff they do, and some of the workshops they do, some of the stuff they put on Twitter, some of their website work. So you can I suppose, what's another good network? Well, an interesting network is the Academy of Fab Stuff, I suppose, and they do celebration like mad and give out awards. So there's all sorts of really great creative ways you can do it. But the important thing is you do have to pay attention to that. You have to, if you know, this is not about being overly British and terribly nice about did anyone do very well on that. You do collectively make the most of what you've done, and most networks do something that has a social side to it to do that. It's a really important part of it. It's relational after all.
It's relational. It's relational. Underlined in bold. I think that's the message from across the week. And so the final point for me, Becky, I might turn to Danny in just a sec, is appropriate given that you're joining us from one of the Heathrow departure lounges. Is that you were talking earlier about part of the NHS mindset is to treat things like hierarchical projects rather than distributed leadership across networks. Do you think there is something in the NHS psyche which does make us less predisposed to networks? Do you look at other countries
Yes.
and think they're better suited? And what can we learn from other experience?
I mean, we are, I say, you've got to remember the best of the bureaucracy, which is the bureaucracy has meant that despite governments who've had some antithesis to the NHS, it's really lasted. So, it has got something very, very structured at its heart, and that is a hierarchy. I think we've got, I think there is some tipping point coming along. So I was listening to we all know about the chief execs in the room chanting, "We can do it." And we also know that all the meetings this week nationally have been about A&E and finances, and you have to deliver both of those. Have we heard that before? Oh, I think that was last year, the year before, the year before that, and the year before that. Has performance managing that every year made any difference to that? No. Will somebody realise that? Yes. So I'm very heartened when I talk to Rob Webster, who's the STP lead in West Yorkshire, pushing back to some of those things, saying, do you know what, we're not doing it like that. But I'm finding that the people who are most courageous about this are people who have got track record in collaboration. You can always collaborate when you've collaborated before, and who know and have had some level of experience or have been on programs that have taught them how to lead as peers. And I think that it's pretty fundamental. It's a skill set, and so we have got to do something about our senior leaders being able to do this type of work. So there's so the old world bites back, it pushes back all the time. But I'm heartened when I hear some of our really fabulous leaders doing some really great work, pushing that network type working through. And actually, to be honest, the fact that we've been doing you've been doing webinars this week, we've been doing WebExes on this week, hundreds and hundreds of people listening into this. It's absolutely happening in the health system in New Zealand. It's absolutely happening in America. It's absolutely happening in Sweden. We are behind the curve on this. I'm off to Canada because I'm an expert in this, and they want to do more. And your profit in your own land is really interesting and tricky. So we are behind the curve, but I do see some movement going on now.
That is a very hopeful note to end on, Becky. Thank you. We are pretty much out of time. So Danny, if people have missed what's been going on this week, how can they catch up?
Well, if you go to the webinar page on our website, you can see the 90-second summary videos, but also the full webinars from every day this week, and we'll have this one up shortly.
Excellent. And does Kaleidoscope do stuff around networks?
Yeah, a little bit, so
I've heard. Yeah. Well, Becky, look, you've been an awful plugger at your book, but you've been a great plugger at sort of networks more generally, and what we're doing here at Kaleidoscope. Becky, it'd be great to come to you in just 1 second for one final reflection, one final nugget of advice for all of those joining. But just to say again, thank you so much for everyone who has joined across this week. We here at Kaleidoscope, we're very much on this network bandwagon, and we're trying to think of a range of ways we can support networks across the country. So if you're interested in a conversation, don't hesitate to get in touch, and we'd love to talk to you. Becky, a final reflection before you go aboard your flight.
So just to say that we do this in our personal life so much, and we do it at work so little, so just bring yourself to work.
Lovely. Great reflection. Becky, thank you very much indeed. The last thing I have to say is that, Danny, it's your birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
From all here at Network Fest. I hope you have a lovely, I'm sure this is the highlight of your day.
It is, absolutely. Network Fest has been building up to my birthday. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Danny, thank you. And thank you for your help. Danny, thank you for your help. Becky, thank you for joining. Thanks everyone else. And we'll see you again. Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.